Howdy, this is Jim Rutt, and this is The Jim Rutt Show. Listeners have asked us to provide pointers to some of the resources we talk about on the show. We now have links to books and articles referenced in recent podcasts that are available on our website. We also offer full transcripts. Go to jimruttshow.com. That's jimruttshow.com. Today's guest is Ed Latimore. Ed is a best-selling author, a professional heavyweight boxer, how about that, and a competitive chess player. Welcome, Ed.
Hey, Jim, man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Curious, what's your ELO score in chess?
It has taken a hit lately, and I only play on chess.com because I don't have time at all to go sit in OTB tournaments. My peak is 1850. Right now I'm playing maybe 100, 150 points weaker than that, but I expect I'll get back in the form.
Yeah, all right, that's good. Maybe we should play chess one day. I'm not a great chess player. I've never really studied the game, but I played a lot since I was a kid. As I tell people, I'm a good barroom chess player, and I can usually beat street hustlers, even if I'm not in the finest of conditions, shall we say.
That's pretty much my MO. Downtown, those guys have... I don't go downtown often, but when I'm down there, they try and play it. It never goes well for them. And I don't have any pity if you're willing to bet money on something that is not a game of chance. Like, you're pretty much hoping that you're better than me because most people you might be, but I should be better than most people. It's a good time though. It's fun.
It really is. I've always enjoyed the game. Anyway, today we're going to talk about Ed's new book. In fact, we're doing the interview before the book comes out, but it'll be out by the time we publish, and it's called Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business, Boxing and the Art of Life. I also read two of Ed's essays in preparation for it, one called 5 Reasons Why I Quit Boxing with Only One Loss, and then the other one, The Book Made Me Do It, Why I'm Boxing Again. Ed has just very recently come back. He must have won because he looks pretty good. Doesn't look too beat up. So he did win.
I took a pretty good shot, though. I'll tell you, because you read that essay to why I quit, one of the reasons I talk about is the size difference. And coming back, I say in the essay coming back that my plan to drop the cruiserweight, the weight class below heavyweight. Now, that didn't happen this fight. I actually ended up fighting a heavyweight fight, and I was quickly reminded of why I had that idea to drop in the first place. This opponent, not the best record of any guy I fought, but he was the heaviest and the strongest of any guy I fought by a fairly significant margin on both fronts. And in the first clinch, I was like, okay, this guy can hurt me. And then he hit me with a great overhand right. And if I hadn't been developed and improved my skills the way I talked about in the one essay while I'm coming back, that shot would have done some damage. But instead, I just was able to ground my feet out, stay balanced, and roll with it. And it woke me up, but didn't do anything else. And my head was hurt for maybe a day or two after.
That's a good thing. It's interesting you mentioned in both the book and in your essays about your size. And I went back and researched a little bit. How big were the classic boxers of the past, right? And Muhammad Ali, 214 pounds, right? 6'3", a little taller than you. You're 6'1", as I recall.
6'1", yeah.
And Mike Tyson, my favorite, 5'10", 220, shorter than you and about your weight. And as I remember, my real favorite, Joe Frazier, he was about 200 pounds, right?
Yeah, the game has really changed, and there are a lot of reasons why it's changed in this regard. First, the Eastern Europeans entered the chat, and they really weren't able to prior to the fall of, there was the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then all of those guys had to develop and come out. So you see these massive boxers now, like the Klitschko brothers, for example. They are here, or they were here, and because they showed up, everyone else kind of had to evolve. There wasn't really anything else to do. The other reason why these guys are so huge is that heavyweight boxing is is the one division. Yeah, I guess the heavier you go up, the more this is true, with it being most true at the heaviest division, heavyweight, where your body can mature into the weight class. Like if you box from childhood, you're just not ever going to become heavy enough unless you're like 6'5" to be a heavyweight boxer. You need to go put some mass on, and guys figured that out. So you got a lot of guys coming from other sports to become heavyweight boxers, or who spend a lot of time in the weight room and they're like, okay, I should go box because I'm a big guy. And some of them learn, but now you look, I crunched the numbers on it. The average height of a heavyweight boxer today is 6'4", and that's heavily skewed to the left. So most of these guys are taller than 6'4", and the average weight is like 240. So
Yeah, back in the day, a guy 240 was like, Ron Lyle or something. He was a hell of a hitter, but not that finesse of a boxer. He had a good winning record, but when he get to the top guys, he always got his ass kicked.
yeah, and you see this in like the other sport too, where size and strength matters. Football, the size of a lineman in the 60s and 70s is a small running back today.
Yeah, I remember when my beloved Washington Redskins had the first guy in the NFL over 300 pounds, right?
Yeah, right. Now today, like 300 pounds. I mean, what is you're definitely not playing the line if you're under 300 pounds. Elite offense, probably not defense either. Definitely not defensive tackle. Maybe a defensive end in a 4-3 scheme, but like maybe. Nah, the people get bigger, or rather, the nutrition and our knowledge of the sport and how to train has improved, and so we can get guys bigger and stronger, and that's not even factoring in performance enhancing drugs, which a lot of guys aren't using, but many are.
Yeah, within the legal rules or right on the edge of the rules, and carrying baby piss in their pocket and what have you. Right?
But even playing within the rules, right? Like you said, like creatine, for example, that's a pretty big game changer. That allows you to really get after in the weight room and have some serious hypertrophic changes in your muscles. I don't think guys were using it, certainly not to the degree they are today. Liver pills, liver tabs are what the bodybuilders were using to put on mass back in the day. But I don't think that talking to guys in boxing, I know the idea of liver tabs hadn't made it to boxing, and guys definitely weren't even lifting weights. I mean, still there's still a pretty big debate in boxing right now about whether you should even lift weights. So people just got bigger.
Yep, indeed.
And I'm only 6'1" and I wasn't blessed with that gene that gives you all that muscle for no reason.
You're a pretty muscular looking dude, though, the pictures I see. I certainly wouldn't want to get into a fight with you. I wasn't a terrible street fighter growing up. We'll get into that.
You street fight, oh man, those are dangerous.
Actually, we'll talk about that later. Fortunately, not in our town where we had rules, basically. It was quite interesting. Anyway, let's get back to the story of your book, which basically, starts when you were a kid living up on the hill. Tell us about that.
Oh man. The Hill District is...
by the way, that's in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, PA. The Hill District, specifically the Terrace Village housing projects, which are now... I'm not quite sure exactly what they are, but I know what they're not, which is like the projects I grew up in. That place, when I think about my childhood there, I tell people all the time, I don't have like warm, happy memories of my childhood. It's just not a thing. Like there are happy times I remember, of course, right? But when I think about the Hill, the first thing I think about, I had a friend up there, and he was a cool guy, at least as cool as we could be, at 6, 7, 8 years old. But I remember, fighting on the school bus and in elementary school, and a lot of the violence around. I remember that a lot. There was a lot of drug violence in particular. Our drug-fueled violence, because this was in the 90s. The late 80s, early 90s, with the crack epidemic, that was in full swing, and what that did, along with this was right after gangs had really started using guns and things of that nature. And so we deal with that very often. I lived next door to to some addicts at different points in my life. The Hill was no different. You see a lot of crazy stuff like that kids aren't supposed to see. And something that I don't think I put in the book, but when it comes to your memories of things, your your brain is really good at protecting you and making sure that you can function. It's a clear memory to me today, but I know that at some point I blocked it out because my mom told me I just wouldn't talk about it. I had blocked it out. When I was 3 or 4, I seen this kid I used to play with. He went across the street one day. I didn't cross the street. It was to get ice cream. And I didn't cross the street because for whatever reason, my mom had it drilled into me. You don't cross the street without adults. He crossed the street. Guess there was a police chase or something going on, and he gets ran over. And it's clear as day in my head seeing that. And my mom told me that, like, after that happened, I had ran and hid behind the steps, and they had to come find me. And I just didn't talk about it for almost 10 years. And then one day I came down the steps and just started talking about it. My mom was like, "Oh, you remember now?" Well, yeah, I didn't know I couldn't remember, but I guess at some point I blocked out. And I tell that story to illustrate just, you know, I think about what I remember about my childhood. And a lot of it is miserable, but that's what I remember. I wonder what else I've blocked out. And that is a really good way to sum up what it was like growing up there and in the Hill. And then it didn't get much better when we moved from the Hill district because they decided they were going to tear those projects down. So they relocated the families who lived in those projects to another project. This one was clear across town, Northview Heights housing project. And that one, you know, more the same thing. More the same thing. The difference was though, was they put up this like fence around the neighborhood that was like it was a gated community, right? But not like in an elegant, a sense. It was we were gated because they were trying to figure out how to deal with like the influx of criminals pretty much. As if the criminals are coming in like, nah, they're being like, bred in the in the environment, but they wanted to be able to track people as they come in and out. So you had to like show your driver's license and stuff like that. And if you were on a bus, it didn't matter, so it was pointless. That was like the real main difference. That and I was like a little older, and so that meant, you know, things hurt more. Yeah, get kids hit harder, stuff like that. But I tried not to spend. I didn't like my neighborhood. I didn't like my home life either. I really didn't. I really didn't like either one, home life. This is something that was really hard for my mom to understand whenever she used to be subscribed to a mailing list, and I would write about my childhood. And she was like, "You act like your childhood was so bad." And I'm like, "Well, am I telling any lies here? And if I'm telling a lie to you, I mean, I'll correct it. But I wasn't happy, and I didn't feel, as I think back on it, between the traumatic issues at home because my mom was, I could just say crazy and put a dot on it and put a period at the end of it, but she, I think she loved us, but she didn't do a great job in setting an example, and the discipline, I put that in air quotes, was heavy-handed, definitely abusive. And then, always couldn't she literally cussed us out constantly. So it was this constant like low level stress at home. And then it's not like school for the most part until I got to high school. It's not like school was any better because there I'm dealing with fighting and all that. So there was never really a chance for me to feel like safe and just hang out, relax. There's always it's like like PTSD, man. Like there's always.
Yeah, cortisol levels were no doubt high, right?
Oh, for sure. I did research about my book, which ultimately ended up, and it's a memoir, so I didn't have to do it. I just didn't know I was writing a memoir at first. So the first draft is a different kind of book. But one of the things I learned was when children have a chronically elevated level of cortisol and are chronically under stress, that permanently alters the shape and function of the amygdala. And so you are always in this low level kind of fight or flight. They call it hypervigilance. And that really described a lot of me. Like my wife and I joke about this all the time. I'm like a stray dog that got brought in. And you know how you bring a stray dog in and you got to like treat that stray dog with care because he needs the love and he needs the support. But boy, he really can't trust anyone because everybody else has been treating him like shit and it's terrible. That's how I felt a lot of times once I got past that environment.
Yeah, it came through in the story. And, we have a shelter dog now, actually. And we first took him in 4 years ago. He was very skittish, and he's gradually come around. Good dog, very friendly, happy. But I don't think he was abused, but he was certainly neglected a lot, right? And
Yeah, like abuse takes so many different forms, or at least more forms than we tend to think about. And there's like the active kind that you can easily see because it leaves bruises or wounds or psychological damage in the way someone is spoken to. But there's also on the other end, if that's too much, too little is effectively neglect. Not always, but because sometimes, there's overindulgence and that leads to another type of problem. But you don't have overindulgence problems when you grow up in poverty and public housing. Like that's not a thing. But you can have neglect, and I witnessed a lot of neglect. And one thing I can say very, very positively about my mom is we were never neglected. We definitely, were somewhat food scarce. I would never say we were food secure as the sociologists describe it, but my mom did what she had to do to make sure we had food. And even though, like, I still remember seeing eviction notices and my mom freaking out. We never got evicted. We never got evicted. There were times where we had to ration food, but we never were without food for a day. And so I would never say I was neglected, but the other type of abuse, oh, absolutely. And the scars of that, you don't realize how bad it is until you get around something that isn't like that. And that's what happened to me when I got to high school.
yeah, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Your mom was a single mom. Your dad was around. He existed, but he was a long way away. Why don't you talk a little bit about your mother and her singlehood and maybe some of her funky boyfriends and your relationship with your father?
Yeah. So like I don't have any memories of my mom and dad ever existing in the same house. I never seen it. At some point, they liked each other enough to not just make me, but my sister, because my sister and I have the same mother and father. And we know that for sure because my dad, like, did the whole like sue for paternity thing, or my mom did, however that works. But for all intents and purposes, other than the child support that my dad was forced to pay, he wasn't around. He wasn't around at all. And normally when I talk about my parents, I start with my mom. That has changed now that I have a son. And now I think a lot about my dad because I hadn't thought about my dad most of my life. He died when I was 18. And so it's to the point now, and I'm 40 now. So 22 years ago, I just, it's not like he did much when he was here for me. And when he was passed, my life didn't change too much. But once I had my son, I was like, oh, this is, we were like in month 6 or 7. And my son is being what babies do, they cry and they don't sleep and you don't sleep and you're miserable and you're tired and you're like, what did I get myself into? But at the same time, you look at the guy, you're like, but you're adorable and I love you and I can never imagine being away from you. And when I had that thought, I was just like, I don't know what was wrong with my father decided that the best course of action was to move to a completely different city with no real justification. It's not like he was making a bunch of money or something like that. I understand parents and it not working out and them living in separate homes and separate lives and going their separate ways romantically. I get that. What I don't get is how someone could move willingly for no good reason to another location. With all of that said, then I got even angrier, when I was writing about in the book some of the boyfriends my mom had and how they abused my sister and all.
This guy Fred seemed like a real piece of shit.
So as part of the research, I looked him up in Pennsylvania, and you're in Pennsylvania now, so this is worth knowing. In Pennsylvania, you can like look up a person's criminal cases free to the public. You can look up their whole criminal history. Even if you get a non moving traffic violation, those show up. I guess moving ones too. So I went and looked this guy up. It took me a little while because I remembered. That's how powerful this thing is. And when someone hurts you and messes with you, I remembered the guy's full name. And so I had seen him since I was like 5 or 6, and I remembered his full name. I was able to look him up. And yeah, he a bunch of other charges, a lot of stuff dealing with hurting women and or harassing them. So it was just like an MO. But what made me angry, and I've had to like reconcile and work with, because you still get angry about this stuff, but you gotta figure out a way to deal with it, which I had. I think mostly is my dad. He never stepped in, never did anything, never tried to get us out of that environment. And so what that left me with was I had to square this in my mind one or two ways. Either he was so uninvolved that he didn't notice something was wrong, or he noticed and didn't care. Either way, the fact that there was no reaction or no step, intervention, whatever, on his part, that really bugged me for a long time. And I've never actually talked to my sister about this particular thing, and I should. I mean, I did consult my sister for some parts of the early book because my memories are imperfect. And one thing I'm learning, I learned about the book, is that sometimes you remember something how it didn't happen. It was still bad, but you remember it differently. I thought, for example, there's a story I took out the book because I couldn't be 100% sure it happened that way. I thought my mom got arrested. And that seems like something you would clearly remember, right? And I thought I clearly remembered it. I looked up the record on the Pennsylvania Criminal History Search. It showed there that she was released of wrong reconnaissance. My sister was like, it didn't happen that way. She didn't get arrested. And I'm like, okay. And then she tells the story from her perspective, and I'm like, maybe it didn't happen. With that said, in the book, I tell the story of the guy who tried to push his way in the house after my sister to hit him with an egg or something like that. And as I'm talking to my sister about it, she was like, "No, he pushed his way in the house. He tried to push his way in the house because he was trying to get to his girlfriend that was hiding in our house from him. The woman who I talk about in the story who we'd hear getting beat. She said she was trying to push her way in the house, and she was trying to protect herself, and he pushed you over to get in. There. So we both remember that he tried to push him his way in, right? I thought it was, I don't have any memory of this woman being in our house, but apparently my sister does. And my sister has no memory of hitting this guy with an egg or his house, or whatever, but I do. But both of our brains remember the very traumatic him trying to get into our home. Right. So these things are funny like that, the way I guess this trauma affects you and your interpretations of things. But I say all that to bring it back to what you said about, my parents. It's hard for me to really talk about my dad. It's fine talking about him. It's hard for me to square his behavior, but it's also hard for me to square my mom's behavior because my mom, to my mom's credit, after she dealt with a series of these just awful dudes, I don't remember her bringing any guys around the house when I was in high school or middle school. It's like but when we were the youngest and most vulnerable, so that matters a lot, and had a pretty big outcome on how, a pretty big influence on how we interacted with adults afterwards.
Yes, it really is terrible, terrible story. Some of the stories you tell in the book, but important to say, tell the story of who you are, right? That's the foundation for both better and worse. But fortunately, you were able to transcend that. So let's move on to the next stage of your life, which was middle school. And one of the themes in your book, as at least I took it away, is opportunity, luck, and do you take advantage of luck and opportunity when it shows up? Initially, middle school sounded like it was pretty bad. As you described it, a war zone.
Yeah, because because the way the school system works, or the school system I was in here in Pittsburgh, is that there was a feeder system where your school, the school you went to, was determined by where you lived. And then from elementary school, there were fewer elementary schools, or more elementary schools, fewer middle schools, and the fewest high schools. And so at each level, you were merged with more people from surrounding areas. Where I was fed into was Allegheny Middle. And that not just fed, more kids from my project, but other projects, and then a few lower, and then a few poor neighborhoods, or like, we used to call them like white trash neighborhoods. They're pretty much your poor, like barely working class whites, a lot of, and the poor blacks. That's, who went to this school. And so you get a lot of disruptive behavior from this group, which makes learning just impossible. You don't realize it. If you're a little better or a little smarter, you think you're okay. But I, very quickly found out that I had glaring deficiencies. But overall, I mean, I didn't like middle school either. I hated middle school. You know what the best part about middle school was? When I got to go to this gifted center. There was one day a week.
Yeah, that's the thing about, I was going to say, an opportunity that you took advantage of. How did you get selected for that? And tell us a little bit about that program.
I wish I could remember how I got selected. I just know how they selected. I guess, your teacher nominates you, you take a test, the test says, yeah, you should be there, and then you get to go. For me, those are the happiest memories of elementary school and middle school, getting to go to that program one day a week, because I just liked being, it was an environment where I didn't have to worry about getting harassed. I think that's what it came down to. The work was a little more interesting and fun, but I could actually, I mean, the work at my regular school was probably interesting and fun, but I could never discover it because I was always dealing with some type of disruption or problem, or assault on my person that I had to defend. Because I never got bullied. I mean, like, in the pure sense of the word, people tried to bully me, but one of the things that was drilled into me growing up where I grew up and being in that place, and you just get to see it, is that you don't ever let somebody just pick on you. You don't ever let somebody just hit you. You take the altercation to a physical level as well. Let them know there's a cost for bothering you. Some people will be willing to pay that cost, so there's nothing you can do about it. But the one thing that is going to be like absolutely happen is that if you don't make it clear that there's a cost that comes with it, more people are going to take advantage of you.
Yeah, that was certainly true where I grew up as well. I was, several steps above where your family was, but it was still in the physical tradition. I would say the neighborhood I grew up in was at the line between upper working class and lower middle class. My father dropped out of high school after ninth grade. My mother left home when she was 14, somehow managed to graduate from high school a year early at the age of 16, took her nickels, dimes, and quarters, bought a bus ticket from a small town in northern Minnesota to Washington, D.C., where she lied about her age and got a job as a telephone operator, right? So that was kind of typical for our home where I grew up. And half the adults were high school dropouts, half were high school graduates, and nobody had gone to college. But, sort of fighting was certainly a thing that you either did or you were a pussy, basically, one or the other. And I still remember very vividly, and I think it's one of the things that made me as the person that I am. Our family also, for a wonderful luck on our part, loved books. We had many books, and books were considered holy. If you ever bent over a corner of a book, man, you get smacked across the face, right? If you laid a book face down, you'd get whooped. One day I went down to the bookmobile, and I loved
The old bookmobile, we had that too, yeah.
yeah, and had my arm I was 7 years old, my arm so full I could barely carry 6 books. And a bad kid named, I'll just give his initials, which I love, BM, came up behind and knocked the books out of my hand, and they fell on the ground. And fortunately, they had those plastic library covers on them, so the books weren't harmed. Old BM was 2 or 3 years older than I am, outweighed me by 40%, 6 inches taller. But the assault on the books made me go berserk, and I attacked him and took him to the ground and got in 2 licks. And of course, outweighing me by 40 pounds, 40%, he just flipped me over, got me down, got in a couple of licks. But this was the interesting thing. He then got up, extended his hand, helped me up, and patted me on the shoulder, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it goes.
Yeah, basically, he said, and I never had another problem with BM ever again, because he knew that I would come after him if he, came after me. And bullies, they want easier victims.
Easy targets. That's it. That story reminds me, I always I try to be fair, and I always got to give my mom, because I got to give my mom credit for the things she did well. One of the things my mom did very well, in our home, I still remember books are treasures. You don't mess with books. You all, even when we were grounded, we could read.
That was our family's tradition too. Books were wholly important, and because neither parent was educated, they took them, and they were self-educated in their adulthood by reading lots of books and such. And and again, to this fighting thing, especially in middle school, everybody had to fight some, right? Or you were just socially dead or something. I don't know what those people were, but as I mentioned in our pregame, there was fighting, but it wasn't the vicious, dangerous kind of fighting. You could still get a tooth knocked out or a broken collarbone, but we did have rules, which I later called the Code of Adelphi. Never hit somebody when they were down. If they stay down, fight's over, right? If anybody produced a weapon, all the bystanders would grab them and beat their ass, right?
Oh yeah, wasn't the rules like that, man? Yeah.
To my mind, that kind of fighting is probably fairly healthy for middle school males. And the attempt to totally suppress fighting, I've long suspected, has something to do with these school shootings, right? Because, if you're being bullied, you can't do a goddamn thing about it. What the fuck do you do, right?
Not only that, but when you build a culture that teaches this kind of pacifism and doesn't let guys direct it in a healthy is probably not the correct adjective, but relative to what could happen, i.e. a shooting, definitely a healthy outlet, then you're going to end up with what I think are a lot of guys with suppressed rage, guys that don't feel confident. And on top of that, like the story you told, it's a way we bond sometimes. That's not just showing you see at the end of a boxing match, for example, the guys are hugging and everything. You just want to war. You respect each other. Hey, I know you can handle you. You know you can handle you. We're in a good spot. Even if, no matter who wins or loses, you stood up for yourself and you didn't get pushed around. And that is something that is often, if not it's lost now. I'm not going to say we should endorse fighting in schools. If for no other reason than my experience is probably, it sounds like a bit different than your experience. With that said, we also need to recognize that the urge of aggression is going to show up, and you should channel it one way versus another. This is why I tell all guys, I think all guys should engage in a combat sport. They don't have to compete professionally. Heck, they ain't even got to compete amateurly, but they should learn how to go and get in the ring and spar, because even that competence and knowing that you can deal with a problem physically, the realest kind of problem is physically, that I think is good for one's mental health.
I absolutely agree. And again, in our day, that was just your father taught you how to fight, right? It was just part of growing up. And my dad was a former Marine and a cop.
Oh, so they there you go.
He knew some pretty good tricks, right? He taught us all of them. But anyway, let's move on to another luck story: the cocaine prank that you pulled.
Ah, the cocaine prank, man. I don't even, I got this sense of humor, and you've been doing your research. I've found out, by the way, anyone listening, man, Jim really does his research on the guest. Told me things I didn't even know were sitting out there as public knowledge. Not on some stalker shit, but I'm sure I mentioned it somewhere and he found it. But that but where I was going with that is if you look at my social media, man, I make jokes all the time about crackheads and the crackhead hustle and things of that nature. And a lot of it is my sense of humor is really built on shock. And that's just built into me. I'm not a prank guy in the sense that I'm gonna do something like I could never do those things on the street with the camera. That's weird. But I do like socially pranking people. People go, what is this guy talking about? Kind of deal. And so when I was, I think in the 7th or 8th grade, it was in middle school, so it was 7th or 8th grade. I'm pretty sure it was the 8th grade. I decided I would get a bag of sugar and take it to school like it was cocaine. I had no idea what I was doing. Like, if my son came and told me that he did something like that, I'd freak out because I know how bad that situation could get. And it got fairly bad for me. A kid finally used that as an excuse to fight me. And to be fair, probably should have fought me because if I was on the street, somebody would have probably shot me for approaching them and asking if they wanted to buy cocaine and showing them what I thought was cocaine. Meanwhile, now I know, sugar don't look nothing like cocaine. Well, I would say nothing like cocaine, but like if you fall for sugar, somebody's giving me cocaine, you need to stop.
Now, if you used powder sugar, it would have worked better.
Yeah. But if you use regular crystalline sugar and you fall for that, yeah, you need to stop doing drugs. You're not good at this.
Yeah, you fool. You're a fool.
but yeah. So I got into a fight with that kid over a pretty big fight. And then after the fight, they arrested me. The police arrested me and they were like, oh, okay. And I'm like, what is going on? Why are you arresting me? It wasn't real. And they explained something called the cosmetic lookalike law. And I was like, what is this? So anyone out there listening, if you act like you're selling something as something, and they arrest you for it, they're gonna arrest you as if you're actually selling or trying to distribute the thing that you have. And that's a law, at least in Pennsylvania. I looked this up. It's called different things in different states, but many states have some variation of this. You can't act like you're selling drugs and you're not actually selling the drug, because what a lot of dealers will do, I know this, call them dummy rocks, where they'll take like breadcrumbs and Orajel for the numbness. They'll and sell them as crack. And so you can't do that. You can't act like you got it, but you ain't really got it. And then the cops bust you like, oh, it was just crumbs, whatever. So they arrest me, and I'm like, all right, this the end. I don't know how bad this could get. But then they decide to not go book me and let me go. And they just say, this is a lesson. They're like, if you'd done this on the street, it could have been way worse than just a kid having a fight with you. And let me go after that. And I didn't, it took me a while before I understood how close I came, but I also didn't want to be in trouble. So it's not like I ever tried something like that again. But my entire life could have been altered. I could have been thrown in the system very early for some that I thought was a harmless prank.
And also consider, a young black man and an asshole cop, could have easily gone the other way, right?
It could have easily gone a different route. And it's one of those things that like I hadn't really thought about it until I was writing, and I've told the story occasionally, but yeah, sometimes, all it takes is somebody giving you a chance. like that luck, man.
But then you took it. So let's go on to the next stage. Your experience with the gifted program showed you that there was another way to be, and you decided to apply to a special high school program. Tell us about that a little bit.
So yeah, I talked about the feeder system where you go based in your neighborhood, but you could also apply to another school if they had like something you wanted to study. My high school had a high tech program, as they called it, like a vocational program where I learned like electronics, but I had to apply. And I applied because there was no way I was doing 4 more years of being in the environment that I had just dealt with in middle school. So I applied and got in, and I get to this high school. It's clear across town. So an hour bus ride there and an hour bus ride back. So I'm spending 2 hours a day commuting. But like the classes are great. And it's like a truly diverse environment in like from an intellectual and like physical appearances standpoint. And I meet some really great people there. Friends that are still my friends to this day, and their families are my friends because those people really they just showed me a different way of living. And then they weren't like trying to show, they weren't like, here's how we live in civilized society. No, they were just like, we became friends. I became friends with the guys over video games, and then I got exposed to other people as you become friends with people in high school. And then their families though, they really embraced me like I was their own. And none of them ever said anything like, yo, this kid is from the ghetto or nothing like that. Either positive or negative. They just, I'd show up there like I spent like every day after school at my buddy Eli's house and his family. And then his dad would drive me home, all the way home. This Jewish man drive with the projects every night. They drop me off. And I said to them at my son's baby shower, I was like, you guys, you never said anything, but like, you guys knew my home life was a wreck. So you doing that, you driving me home, that meant the world to me, and I could never repay you. And they was like, it was nothing, They act like it was nothing, but it was way more than nothing. That's a watershed moment in my life. I don't know where I would be if I didn't feel welcome somewhere. Because even if I went to if I had went to that school, but I still didn't have like a refuge after, I'd just go home, and then I'd be even more isolated because I'm an hour away from where everyone else lives because all my friends live on that side of town.
And you'd be a nerd dude in the hood, right? Probably not a great thing to be, right?
Yeah, and I just sit in my room and play video games. Because what else would I do? But no, it made a big difference in my life.
Now, you struggled a bit academically, right? Even though you're really a smart guy, but your background in middle school had been something less than exemplary, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I didn't learn because all those disruptions, and when you get to high school, what you realize is that everything scaffolds. It's like this in math, which was by far my worst subject because I had never learned algebra properly. I had a a tough time with everything after that. And then on top of that, I didn't want to be home studying. So I wasn't studying either. So I wasn't, if I happened to for whatever reason, really grab the subject well, like for whatever reason, my brain does great with languages. When I went in to high school, I hadn't taken a single foreign language class. There were 6 levels of Japanese offered at my high school. I didn't take a language class until my 10th grade year. And in 3 years, I transcended 6 levels of Japanese because I get the way languages work. I didn't have to study that hard, but math busted my ass, man. I pulled up my transcript I wrote an article about how to get better at math because one gets a physics degree, we can, without knowing the end of the story, we can assume that I eventually figured this math thing out at some point. And I wanted to pull up my transcript to just show that like I'm not just a guy telling you some learning hacks, but I happen to be gifted. And I looked at my transcript and I was like, wow, this is even worse than I thought it was. I had ordered it just to pull up an image to put an image up on the website. And yeah, so our high school just gave me fits because of a combination of I wasn't really studying. because I didn't really have time to study, or I wasn't doing work because I was tired when I got home and I didn't want to go home. So I wasn't doing the work. And so, aside from just the part of high school where you just kind of put one foot in front of the other and just turn on assignments, I wasn't doing. And I also wasn't learning because I wasn't studying. So ultimately, at the end of high school, they let me walk at graduation, but I did not graduate. And they actually gave me a chance to graduate again in summer school by making up classes, but I got caught plagiarizing an essay. And so they're like, that's it, click. And then that was the end of that. But you know what? It didn't make a difference. That's a failure of the system in many ways.
But fortunately, you struggled academically, but you also found something you were really good at, which was football.
Yeah, totally by luck.
And it was amazing. You had never even watched a football game, it didn't sound like.
No, nope, never watched a football game. I was learning everything in high school about football, and I just happened to be physically kind of gifted, and so I was like a natural fit on the team. Though when I tried to be a linebacker, I sucked because linebackers you need some experience. I wasn't that gifted, but they put me on the line as a defensive lineman my senior year, and I just exploded. And I had a really great senior year. I got the attention of Georgetown University, but they looked at my grades and they were like, "Whoa, we can't do this." And just go to show or just to show you why it matters, being naturally intelligent just isn't enough. You got to work hard because if you don't work hard and you don't apply the right way, it won't manifest and people will think you're an idiot. You'd be better off if you had played dumb the whole time. When Georgetown was interested in recruiting me, I was told that I simultaneously, of all the recruits, had the highest SAT score and the lowest GPA. And they could not square that. And the school they would have been like, look, if your GPA was just like a 2 something, we could work with that. But it wouldn't matter how, and my GPA score wasn't nothing crazy. I think it was like 1,300 is what I ended up like in the old SAT. I don't know what that is now. But we can't do anything with this. So they lost interest, and then we were going to take a visit, and then this was right around when the DC snipers showed up, and they were like, we're not really doing recruiting business right now because there's a guy killing people randomly in DC. So that went by the wayside. But the University of Rochester showed up, and here's a school that I definitely shouldn't have been in. Like, definitely shouldn't have been. But
Yeah, it's a very elite school, right? It
was like a top 30 when I went.
Yeah, I looked it up for the show, and its average SAT is 1440, which is like
Which
fuck,
is nuts, right? But they looked at me and my background and my
Well,
SAT
1300
score.
been pretty impressive in those days. I mean, 1300 then is probably not far from 1440 now.
Right. And they were like, we're just going to ignore that GPA thing and have you come play football because the guy, rest in peace, he's not alive anymore. I think I got his name right. Some people you just remember right. Jason Bendekovich. He recruited me and he was from the area and really he wanted me to go really badly and they were able to they looked past my GPA because of my SAT score and my physical performance. Now it was a Division III school. It's not like they got a scholarship, something I learned the hard way, but it was college. And I was like, everyone else says you should go to college. A few of my friends, and they're like upper middle class parents, they had gone to the University of Rochester. They were like, you should go to this school. It's a great opportunity. And you hear that enough and you're like, all right, I guess I'll go to this school. And I went and it didn't take long for it to be revealed how much I should not have been there. Like I really didn't belong. On any level. The academic part is obvious. That's clear. But socially, I ended up making one friend. It took a while, but you don't realize how much like culture matters until you're placed into a completely different culture and it's like an island. Like everyone is super different. Everyone comes from a very different background. And I talked to black kids who didn't believe. They were like, what do you mean you're from the projects? what is this place, the projects you speak of kind of deal? I'm like, wow, like no one. Yeah, well, but I ended up having, I happened to meet one guy up there, I'll get into him, who I became real good friends with. But I felt isolated. It was my first time really being away from the little bit of familiarity that I had. And even though this was an objectively better environment to live in than the one I would have lived in back home, because I didn't live at home anyway and I was just moving around, floating around the city, I just missed my friends and we weren't doing anything, crazy. Are not crazy, anything like productive. We're just hanging out, drinking over the summer, having a but I missed that. And I felt lonely. Felt lonely. I wasn't doing well in school. I didn't really know anybody. I wasn't really good at making friends out of there. People liked me, but like I didn't bond with anyone. So it took a little while. But I met one guy, this guy Jay, who also happened to be a Rochester local who had a similar background. I think he wasn't from the projects, but he is from a ghetto. I knew that. And we got along really well. And that friendship ultimately like helped me out because when I dropped out, because I had to drop out. They were gonna kick me out, but I was like, you can't fire me. I quit. I didn't know what I was going to do once it was time to get out the apartment, and that was coming within a week. And Jay was like, "Hey man, I happen to be going to Philadelphia this week. You want to ride back to Pittsburgh?" And I'm like, "No, I'm no dummy, man. Like Pittsburgh is nowhere near, and there is no route from Rochester, New York to Philadelphia, PA, where Pittsburgh is on the way. Like that was just somebody being a good homie and looking out and bringing me back home. And so that period of my life, that was it was a blast of fun for a while, but man, all my weaknesses were revealed. Fun fact, I think, I do mention this in the story because it's so important. Well, my dad died when I was 18. It was my senior year of high school. He left me well, he didn't leave me in the sense. He had a life insurance policy. I got $55,000 in cash. I've never had money in my life. I never seen anyone in my life with money. This is not a thing I know to do. So I got $55,000 and I went crazy with it. I don't remember a thing I bought. I just know I spent all of it within 18 months. All of it. Like worse than all of it. I was overdrawing my bank account so I could have some money. And then eventually they were like, go away, you don't have any more money left. Oh, by the way, and you owe us like $500. So like when I drop out, so college, I had this money and I was wasting it. But by the time I get kicked out, I'm like at a low point. I am worse than broke and I have nowhere to live. And, I don't, my friends are like splits. A lot of them are away at college on their own. I got one good friend he went to Carnegie Mellon. So he was in the city. But it was kind of an isolating period, but at the same time, we did manage to find this crummy apartment, and it was crummy, man. Like we didn't have any furniture, we had mice. It was rough, but it was a spot where everybody would come to drink, drink the party.
You developed a taste for the hooch, right?
Yeah, and funny thing, I actually don't think I mentioned this in the book because of the linearity of the story and the detail, but I got college really I was hooked. I mean, I drank a lot when I first went to college. When I got back, I drank a lot. This girl I was dating, the same one whose mother makes an appearance in the story, her father had actually died. Like maybe when I was 20-ish. And he died from alcohol. Like he died in his sleep, drunk one night, I believe. I know he died in his sleep, but I'm pretty sure he was drinking. Um, but we'll put the alcohol part at like 95%. But he was definitely in his sleep. They found him dead, whatever. So I said, let me be a good dude and let me stop drinking around her. And I did that for like 2 years. But then I got right back on right after we broke up. But by this point though, there were all the people around me. I mean, look, here's the thing about drinking. You still end up surrounding yourself with people. I wasn't not drinking because I had a problem at this point. I was not drinking because I wanted to like try to be a good example for somebody I was with. I wish I had known how good that was for me because I wouldn't have to endure the next what the heck, 8 years, 7 or 8 years of heavy drinking once I got back on the bottle
Mm.
in my 20s.
Well, let's move along with our story here. Let's jump to the point where your girlfriend's mother tells you off.
Yeah, because that's the same girlfriend whose dad was drinking and died. I used to talk about how pointless college was for everyone. And I would tell this to everybody because I felt like you could become successful without college. And I still feel that way. The difference is now I got a degree in physics. You can't really say anything to me when I say something like that. But at this point, I was not anything close to that. And I would complain about it to everybody. And one of the people I would complain to was my girlfriend's mom, who happened to be a professor of biology at the University of Pittsburgh. So that's talking shit on somebody's profession, to their face. And to her credit, she was polite about it for a long time. And then finally she snapped one day and was like, let's pretend you're right. And college is a waste of time. Why don't you tell me what you've done with your life for the past 4 years other than show up and eat my food? And she was right. Like, that's how I was surviving. I wasn't making enough money to eat on my own completely. And then she kicked me out. And then at that point, I was, mad and embarrassed and all that and sad. But she was right. She was right. I had not done anything. I didn't have anything to show for myself whatsoever. And so I started looking at things that I could do. I wasn't going to try and go back to college. I still had no confidence in my abilities to learn things at all. I didn't feel like I'd be a good student. And I didn't have the money. I thought about joining the army, but that was right back when we invaded Iraq. And I didn't want to change my life so badly. I was going to risk taking a bullet in the desert to do it. And there was YouTube. YouTube had just really come out. And I was watching fight videos on YouTube. And I said, you know what? There's something I could try. Let me go try this fight thing. I'm gonna try boxing. That's how I ended up in boxing, because I was looking to do, as the most interesting man in the world used to say, beef up my obituary.
That's a great line. I don't think I ever heard that, but I saw that in the book. I go, I think I might steal that. Right?
Yeah, those most interesting man in the world commercials are entertaining. Apparently, they boosted Dos Equis sales by like 600%. But yeah, that's how it started. I didn't want to be like a regular person. And actually, I just didn't want to be a loser for real. I wanted to, if somebody asked me what had done with my life for the past 4 years, again, I wanted an answer, because I didn't have an answer then, and not even close. I mean, I had an answer. I'd worked at Starbucks, had worked at GameStop, like that. That's what I had done. Oh, and I had started drinking again. As we had started to drift and go our separate ways. That was just kind of a nail in the coffin.
Gotcha.
So I found a boxing gym and started boxing. I was bad. I was terrible. Okay. So I won my first fight by knockout, but I found grainy footage of that thing, and it's like, well, it looked like a street fight. And I had won like my first, not my first, but like my record was like 13-5, in a 3-year period. But all 13 of those fights I won by knockout, and all 5 of those fights I lost on points. That might sound impressive, but what that means is all I can do is swing big. I don't have any technique. I'm not learning how to hit and not get hit. I'm not really learning how to box. I'm just brawling within the rules. And that will take you so far, but it won't take you far enough. You won't be able to get out of your region. So what happens while I'm doing this is, the tournaments that go national come up. There's the Golden Glove and the USA Boxing Tournament. Those like the two that have brackets that go from regional to national. And there was this guy I couldn't beat, this guy, Fred Latham. He had been fighting for a long time, so he knew what he was doing. first time we fought, he couldn't hurt me, but I couldn't touch him. He just move around, dance around my sloppy swings and all that. The first time we fought, I actually like swung and missed so badly, I knocked myself down. And I was like, okay, I got some work to do. And I got with this guy, Chris Williams. And Chris Williams he's still coaching now and he's doing a great job. Chris worked on my footwork, worked on how to move in the ring. And when I started training with Chris, the improvements really showed up. And I beat this guy that I had lost against before. I beat him by knockout. Fun fact, I don't know if you researched the guy's name, Wesley Triplett, in the book. Wesley is now serving, I think, like 25 years in prison, man. Boxing is a crazy sport with crazy people. But we fought before he went to prison, clearly. And then I fought Fred again. And this time the fight was close, but I lost. And this time I was like, all right, I don't feel like I'm getting better. I don't feel like I feel like there's something I should know, but I'm not being told. And so that made me switch trainers. And how I switched trainers was crazy because I should have just switched gyms, but I didn't. Instead, I went to both gyms for a while because I was trying to fill it out. See, in my mind, I didn't know it didn't work like that. I wasn't trying to be sneaky per se, like go to one gym and then go to another one. I thought I could just try it out, do a trial period and see how it goes. Nah, doesn't work that way. You got to be like, we're out. You go to that gym. Well, eventually they found out that I was going to the other gym up the road and they kicked me out. As they should have. Like, now that I know the rules, like, I agree. They should have been like, get your ass out of here. Now me and Chris are cool, but at that time, he was not happy, as he should have. He was well within his rights. But I started training with Tom Yankello at that point. And Tom is like, he's a Hall of Fame coach. He's in fact, funny story, he's got there are different levels of Hall of Fame. There's like your county and your state and national and all that. He gets inducted into the PA Boxing Hall of Fame, or not even boxing, I think sports Hall of Fame the same day as my book comes out. So August 5th, he'll be inducted into the PA Sports Hall of Fame. But I started going up to the train and he broke down a lot of my weaknesses and built on what Chris had done with my footwork and had turned me into a pretty good fighter. So good that on our third fight between me and Fred, the guy I couldn't get past, who was the gatekeeper to get to the next level, I knocked Fred out in the second round. And that was after setting him up with shots. It wasn't just like it was this crazy swinging punch. And they, amateur boxing doesn't always get pressed, but like a local newspaper covered it because it was such a big upset. No one was expecting it. And sure enough, I did it. The next week went on to win the PA title against Philly's champion for 201. That's how it works, Philadelphia and PA, and then whichever one you're closest to, that's where you'll fight under. And then the best for each weight class will fight and then get crowned the state champ. So this was 2011. I became the state champ and then went to nationals. And the national tournament is where that theme of luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Because I get to the nationals, and the way it works is you go and they put your name into a hat, pretty much, and pull you out and then pair you randomly. And you can pair it with anybody. You can pair it with the best fighter in the tournament. You can pair it with the worst fighter in the tournament and get an easy path to the top. I don't know where Dominic fell in from best to worst. I just know that's who I got paired with. I got paired to fight California in the first round, and I say, cool, and I'll look him up, man. This guy's massive. He's 6'7", former NFL player, D1 college player kind of deal. Really, really a big human. and I go and then on top of that, I think, oh, he's coming from California, and there are many more big cities in California, so there had to be more fights that he had to go through at a higher level to get to this point. So I'm like, okay, this guy's big and he's good, and I go out and I win our fight. I win our fight by a score of 4-1, and that victory, the other victories in the tournament don't really matter. I eventually get knocked out in the semis, right? But that victory, that changes my whole life because I didn't know that Dominic was being funded by this group out in California called All American Heavyweights. And they were paying their whole mission. They were trying to find former Division I athletes and turn them into boxers. And step one of that was like get a boxer to the Olympics. And then after that, it was like to build this whole stable, like a promotion company. Well, Dominic was their top guy. And so what they saw when they saw me beat him, first thing they were confused because they had never seen me before. They had a pretty extensive surveillance system of the amateur fight scene, so they could study the tape of the guys coming up and prepare a strategy and know what to do. Well, they had never seen me before because I had improved so rapidly in such a short amount of time, going from not being able to get even out of my region or out of my city, I should say, to my region, all the way up to get to the nationals in a span of like 4 months. That is a not relative, but that is a very fast ascent and ability. So for them to see me for the first time, they give me an invite to come out to California and see how I like the program. And this is great because at this point in my life, man, I'm really hurting for money. I'm about to figure out. I got like 2 months left where I live, and then I don't know how I'm gonna get a place. But they're like, "Yo, can you come to California, see how you like it?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." Are you guys gonna pay me to fight? Because they were paying. They paid you a salary,
Pretty good salary, actually, right?
great salary, and it was even better because they paid your rent and gave you food, so you didn't have to spend the money on any of that. So it was all money you pocketed. And that's one of those events, that luck first is when preparation meets opportunity. I could not control who I got paired up with. I could have got paired with a nobody, but I got paired with him.
Who was probably one of the top guys, right, in the country.
He was the top guy in the country because he would go on to eventually represent us at the 2012 Olympics in London. But I got paired with him. But because I had spent so much time training and working on my craft, at that point, that day, I was better, and it made all the difference in the world.
So your hard work with Tom Yankello, your preparation and your strategy with Dominic all work out, and you impress these guys from AAH, All American Heavyweights, and you go out to LA. Tell us what happens then.
LA is a miserable city. I don't understand people who like LA, but I mean, maybe I like the rain. I don't know. But for me, I lived in Carson, California, which is just north of Long Beach, right next to Compton, if you will, like anybody in LA or will want to get an idea. And I get to train full time, which is great because my abilities really improve. There are lots of fights, when I went out there, I had 24 fights in like 4 years, 3 or 4 years. In 9 months, I got that many fights. And that makes a big difference in terms of what you can learn and how you can improve. I also had time. Time and money, and not a lot of money. And my license was suspended, so I couldn't go anywhere. And if you never lived in LA, you can't do that city without a car. Maybe certain parts of it, but not from Carson to the rest of the city. But I could go buy alcohol, and I could buy alcohol very differently than I could buy alcohol here in PA. For people who don't know, PA is one of 2 states that where it's still controlled by like a state liquor board. So we call them state stores, and that's where you go and buy liquor at. It's not like every other state where you can just like go on Walmart or Target and there's a bottle of Jim Beam on the shelf, as you're checking out. It doesn't work like that in PA. where I grew up. So I didn't know that. There's this joke Chris Rock makes where he said, you got to warn somebody when you're about to go to the hood, you know, but I see the Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle. I hate that I mixed them up because then I'm like, all black people look the same. I'm like, nah, man, they were just formative comedians for me, man. But the joke is like, you start seeing the signs in the hood that you're in the hood. It's go liquor store, gun store, gun store, liquor store, gun store. I didn't get that joke when I first heard it because the liquor stores were never in the ghetto. They were like on the corner of like commercial areas. I got to LA though, and man, the only thing he left out was the pawn shop and the check cashing place. There was always liquor store, gun store, pawn shop, check cashing place. That was when you knew you were on a block in the hood in like Gardena or some shit. Like it was like a pretty standard cluster, maybe like a Thai food spot. I didn't get that. But I would just go over to Target and pick up a bottle. Or on my way back from the gym, pick up a bottle. And just, I drank a lot. I drank a lot, one, because I still had that same issue that I had the first time I went to college, which was I didn't really know how to socialize and form these bonds. People liked me. I got invited to go do a lot of stuff. But in terms of what made me feel at ease, I didn't really find anybody I could really kick it with for a while. But I could always kick it with a bottle of alcohol. One of my favorite things to do, I turned into a bit of a hermit, man. One of my favorite things to do, this is when The Walking Dead was big. This is when The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones. So my Sundays, I was so excited. I go get a box of wine. There was this Thai spot up the road. I get a box of wine, some Thai food, or I make tacos, and I would just sit there and watch my Game of Thrones and then Walking Dead. It was a great time. I could find something to do like this every night, though. But I got better. I got better at fighting, worse at drinking.
I got to ask this question, I know if I drink too much, I feel like shit on a shingle the next day. How in the world did you booze like that and get up and bust your ass in the gym all day the next day?
Burning the candle at both ends. There were numerous times I went to the gym, just hung over, man, in bad shape. But sparring was pretty predictable. So I never sparred drunk, but there were a few runs. I think I tell the story in the book about they used to drive us up to Griffith Park, and that's a pretty serious run through. I think that's Burbank up there. A pretty serious run. It's like 6 miles, and a lot of it is up like 2 miles are uphill, and then another like mile is downhill, and then there's like the whole run around. And I've always been a good runner, but I was a great runner that day because that was also the day I was the drunkest, and I didn't want them to think, because they would kick guys out for conduct, not just for losing, but for conduct. I didn't want them to think that I had a problem drinking, so I had to bust my ass, so there were no questions asked. And so part of it was a motivation to keep the drinking under wraps. The other part is just, not to toot my horn, but just built different, But I paid for it because I'm sure, like, no matter how good I did, I could have done better. I think about how I trained when I finally kicked the bottle, and I go, if I had had this drive and this focus and this health when I was an amateur, who knows what my amateur career could have been. But I still had a pretty good amateur career. The best part about the program, aside from them paying for everything and the training, was that I just got exposed to a lot of people. I made a lot of connections in the boxing world that I otherwise would not have been able to make and would have never known. And I got to see what it was like to compete truly on a national level, which made me, again, a better fighter because all of my competition was like nationally ranked and were high-level guys. I was in all the tournaments. They flew guys out. They flew us to guys because money was no object. We fought in every tournament that they could get us in.
During this thing, you had another opportunity, and it's interesting. Sometimes the luck goes against you. You're going to be fighting Dominic again, but this time you have a bad case of the flu.
Yeah, what a crazy crazy time, and I don't get sick that often. And so the Olympic trials, 2012, or I think it's Fort Carson, Colorado. Point is, it's a mile above sea level in February because I had my birthday right before we went. So I know it was February. They flew the people up. There were 5 of us. They flew us all up 2 weeks beforehand, paid for our hotel and food and everything, so we could get acclimated to the altitude, and so that wouldn't affect us when we fought, which is a huge advantage because a lot of the other guys couldn't afford to come up and acclimate, so we go up there and acclimate, and so it wasn't an issue. And about a week and a half into the acclimation, man, I get like wicked sick. It was bad. And you can't really take any medicine because they piss test you. And the active ingredient in a lot of those nasal decongestants, see if I say this right, pseudoepinephrine, or I think that's right.
Yeah, pseudoepinephrine. Yeah, that's the one.
Oh yeah, that's a big no in by the World Anti-Doping Agency. So I couldn't take that, and that's what would have made a difference. Instead, I was trying to use well, that's why it's banned, because it works, right? I always say, if a supplement is garbage or not, by if it's bad. If water says it's okay, probably wasting your money.
Yeah, the good shit's the stuff that's banned. Right?
Yeah, oh for sure. But and they piss test you like right after the fight too, so it's not like it's random. So I couldn't take this medicine. I tried cough drops and Vicks, and none of it really worked. And then there was the fatigue. I couldn't do anything about that. And I believe there's a caffeine limit too. I'll have to look into that, but I'm pretty sure there's a caffeine limit. Like it's called in use. There's like banned at all times and in use, and caffeine, I'm to a certain degree is in use. Don't quote me on this if it's not correct, but I'm pretty sure, not 100%. Either way, there was nothing I could really do for these symptoms, but I knew I could beat just about anyone in the tournament because they would respect, because fighting is interesting. You go out there and a reputation does a lot for you. If someone knows you can hit hard and you're fast, they're going to be a little tentative when they come and deal with you. And you can really play that reputation up too, especially when it's only 3 rounds. So since nobody knew I was sick, I'd be okay. Unless, of course, I draw somebody who knows I'm sick, like somebody in the camps, because we all came up together. We're not on the same team in that sense. And sure enough, I draw Dominic again. What a perfect. It's like fate was like, we're writing this story for you, and you're not gonna believe this chapter. Not only are you gonna fight him again, but you're gonna be sick. Oh, what will you do now? And so I go out there and I fight, and I'm winning the first round, and the second round it becomes a little even, but I am like winded. I'm in like, I've been tired before, but never that tired while fighting. It was another world, and I caught it, and I did not respond to. So they call it RTD, retired in the corner at the pro level. I can't remember what it's called in the amateurs, but it's where you don't answer.
Don't come back out for the next round.
You don't come out for the next round. And so I retired in the middle of the rounds between round 2 and 3 because I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, okay, they're not going to cut me because somebody's got to win or nobody wins. But either way, at least 4 of us aren't winning, and they're not going to cut all 4 of us because they sent 5 guys. They sent me, John Hamm, George Favre, Dominic Brazil, and Charles Martin, who also ended up becoming IBF champ, is a pro. So they sent us up. And I'm like, okay, only one of us can win. So I wasn't really worried about getting cut at this point. And they knew I was sick. They knew I didn't just get rolled over. But what I did know is if I went out there and got knocked out, they put me on like medical watch for a little bit. Because they can't, the way they hired us like employees because you can't pay amateurs that way. They can't get sponsorship. officially in that regard, and they can't get prize money. So instead they pay this like employees. Like I had to pay taxes and got a W-2 and everything. But what that did was that protected us under workman's comp laws. So if you get injured at work, even if your job is boxing, they can't fire you. But once you're healthy, they're gonna get rid of your ass, and they're gonna speed track that, like get their own doctors. So I said, you know what? Let me just call it in. You know, this is not my day. It's not my time. And sure enough, Dominic goes on and wins the tournament, and then wins the Continental qualifier down in I think it was Rio they were in. And in 2012, he makes the Olympic team. You know how great this is though, because Dominic made the Olympic team, and I beat Dominic even though he was before an Olympian. When we were looking for promoters as a professional, that's a point on my resume. Like that's something that stands out, which is how I was able to get a promoter as when I turned professional.
We got to ask you this question. If you had been healthy, what do you think your chances would have been against Dominic?
At that point, he was better. I was better. I only know the first round is where I was like, okay, he ain't going to hate me if he hears this. I think I'd have won because he's not going to hate me because fighters all think they're supposed to win. But even without my ego, man, being as objective as possible, just the way I remember the events and the way that fight was going, if I had my energy, let's put it like this, I would have won on points or lost by getting knocked out, because when you're fighting a taller guy like that, and they did a good job with Dominic, teaching him how to really use his distance way better than he did when we fought. And he shows his difference. He's tall, his distance. He's taller than me by 6 inches, almost 7. He was really doing a great job keeping me away. And those are frustrating fights. So I would have had to kind of sell out and get in there. My defense wasn't anything close to what it is now. So I would have had to take a few shots to get mine in, but when I got them in, they would have hurt. And so he would have had to get me out of there out of my own points.
So it sounds like I've been a hell of a battle, so you're telling me.
Oh, it was still a hell of a battle. Like it just was one that I just didn't have it in me. You know, I always wonder, it puts into perspective, you know, that game that Jordan played when he had the flu. That's a hell of a feat, because you get sapped. There's like tired from running, and then there's like fatigue from illness. Very different types of tired, and for different reasons.
Then you ended up getting hurt during sparring at about the same time that All-American Heavyweight starts to unravel.
Yeah, so All-American Heavyweights unravels because when Dominic made the Olympics, and as I was writing the book, I made sure I interviewed Dominic, so I got his side of the story. Like I thought I understood it, and I got it mostly right. But when he made the Olympics, now everyone's courting him, not just All-American Heavyweights. All-American Heavyweights, to be fair, they took a guy who had never boxed before he was 22, built that guy up, invested in his whole career. He did not have a single amateur fight outside of All-American Heavyweights. So they built his career in his path and then put a lot of money into it. They felt like he should stay with them, even though they're new to the pro game and they didn't know what they were doing. Okay? And they wouldn't give him, you know, he probably would have stayed if they had just like flown his family out to see him fight in London. Like, that's not asking too much. That's less than what a lot of guys who made the Olympic team got. I'm good friends with Terrell Goucher, who was the 170, I think it was 178 or 168 for that year as well, from Cleveland. And he can, you know, they gave him, the city gave him a car, or some dealership gave him a car, and he got to throw the first pitch at an Indians game. And, you know, they treated their Olympians. Even if they didn't win a medal, they just made the team, and that's pretty big. Because there's no guarantee just because you won your country's Olympic trial that you end up qualifying for the Olympics. And that's a whole thing I go into in the book. That's not, we don't have to cover that here. Point is, if you get to the Olympic match, you did a little more than just beat the best guys in your country. So Dominic was like, I'm leaving. And he went with Al Heyman and Premier Boxing Champions, our championship, which was a much more established promotion. And when he left, that was like the point of All-American heavyweights. Get someone to the Olympics. They never consider what would have happened when that person got to the Olympics. One of those things being all the other promoters are going to come out the woodwork. And from a business perspective, they did the best they could because you can't sign amateurs. You can't sign them to promotional contracts. So they couldn't lock him up. So he was a free agent. And he took the best option. But when he left, a lot of the money left. And so they started just cutting down, dwindling everything down. They started cutting guys. So they got rid of like everyone they definitely weren't going to work with. So that left 5 of us at the end of this. It left me, Dominic, John, George, and Charles. Dominic left. That leaves 4 of us. George was a little bit of a ruffian. George was a local kid. What's the best way to say this? He wasn't gang affiliated, but he had a lot of friends in gangs, and every now and then he'd show up to practice with black eyes and shit like that. Like that he didn't get from sparring. Like clearly he was still running them streets. So it was a pretty easy choice for them to drop George. Plus George was my height. So he was my height but a little lighter. So that left me, John, and Ham. Or me, John is Ham. Me, John, and Charles. John Ham is 6'7". Charles Martin is 6'5". I'm 6'1". They make a purely they look at the size. They're like, obviously these guys are gonna give us a better chance of achieving our goal than you. We don't have the money to keep all of you guys. Actually, they did have the money, but we'll get to that. My eye injury, I got spawned Charles. I broke my orbital, and that required surgery. And that workers' comp thing kicked in. And so they couldn't get rid of me, but they also were only required to pay me 2/3 of what they were paying me. But they had to keep paying me. But that's cool, whatever. But I come back from my injury and I spar. I start sparring and getting better, and there's a fight for them to, decide if they're going to keep me or let me go. But really, they don't tell me that. They're just like, it's your first fight back, get better. But I know the game at this point because, they have been pressing me to sign this contract. And the contract, they wanted me to live in Los Angeles, and they were going to take away my stipend and my apartment. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? I like LA, like the 4th most expensive city in the world. You don't even want to pay me that much for fights. They were trying to pay like $1,000 a round. Right now, you're paying me $3,000 a month, plus you're covering my apartment. Well, how am I said to them, how am I supposed to survive? Now, like, you break the math down for me. How am I going to live in this city with you paying me that? And what their answer was? Oh, we're just going to get you fights. I'm like, that might work on somebody that doesn't know shit. But see, a lot of the guys that came into the program, including Charles and John who were left, and Dominic, and George, I guess, of all the guys that were left, though, none of them had fights beforehand. I had fought my way into the program, as opposed to the program going, you look like you're someone that would be good for this program. Okay. So I had seen stuff, and I knew a little bit about the business, and I knew you weren't going to give me enough fights to live in LA. And even if you did, that's no guarantee I'm going to win them fights, because for you to keep me fighting at that pace, I'm going to have to fight some guys I might not be ready for. They weren't trying to hear that. They weren't trying to buzz on any of my terms. I'm like, can you pay me more? Can you let me live where I want? That is another unusual thing. I've never heard of any promoter mandating the city that the fighter has to live in. They were trying to make that happen, because they wanted everything in-house in LA. And I'm like, it ain't going to work. So I knew that my time was coming. My eye injury was protecting me from being cut. That was pretty much it. But once the eye injury healed, I have a fight. And I think I won the fight. But I did not win the fight officially. And I got cut. I got removed from the program, and they were like, all right. And they didn't really give me any time to get out of there. I had like 2 days or something like that to pack my shit up and get on the road out of the apartment.
Tough business.
Very tough business. That would not be the first time I got the tough end of the business when things didn't go well.
Then you returned home, and fortunately, some friends took you in.
Yeah, because if it wasn't for them, I didn't have any money. I mean, because I had used the money I was being paid. I actually was smart about it this time, or at least smarter than I had been before, and used the money to pay down a bunch of debts to increase my credit score so I could get a car. Because if I hadn't done that, oh, I had no idea what the future would look like because I had to drive home. And that traumatized me, man. I was traumatized for long driving for a long time because I did it broke. A trip across the country should be fun and relaxing, but this was not that. I had to sleep in my car most of the time and drive at night on I think it's I-80, the one that cuts across from from Colorado all the way over to like Kentucky. It was
Probably 70. Yeah.
70. Yeah. Yeah, I was worried about tornadoes and shit. Fortunately, I had great weather, like great weather the whole time. Very uncharacteristically good weather for that time of year. And it was a great experience in the sense that this was back before people were like streaming with their what were like you remember when people had iPhones or not iPhones, iPods, and now you talk to somebody who's like under 25 and they're like, even really under 30 for real, but definitely under 25 and like, what's an iPod?
We still have one in our car with 11,000 tracks on it.
Right. And crazy how technology flies, man. I remember when you carried the CD case around with you and then it was your iPod. And I was like, yo, what are you doing? Like, why do you even have music downloaded? You know, you can just stream this. Like, different world.
Anyway, you got home, you hung out with some of your buddies took you in, you had a couple of, jobs, none of which really kind of did much for you. And then you decided you better change your life and you joined the National Guard.
Yeah, the army, man. I needed money for school because I was selling phones. That was my job, and I was frustrated at just how not like it was just a terrible opportunity. I didn't like the work. I didn't see the future. I wasn't making enough money. And at that point in my life, I was like, okay, better go back to school. Got to figure this thing out so I can get a degree and some real prospects for my life. I still wanted to box too, but I was an amateur. I wasn't even pro yet. And I said I need to go like get money for school to go back. So that was why I enlisted in the National Guard so I could get money to go to school. And then I would also be able to do the National Guard as opposed to active duty. So the whole 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year type deal. Now it doesn't really work out that way. And sometimes you get deployed. That never happened to me. They would have threw a wrench in my plans, but yeah, I did that. And as a result, I had to go off to basic training and do the whole AIT development thing. But before I left for basic training, I enlisted on January 4th, didn't leave till June 4th, and I managed to get 3 pro fights in. And so my pro career started and that was cool because it really it didn't make that much of a difference in basic training. Though I guess at some point my drill sergeants they did like they look people up because we had to write this essay and they found who I was and that changed the perspective. First, I'm going into the army as an older dude. Like there
I
were
was gonna say you were like what 27 or something.
27. So some of my drill sergeants I was older than. But that doesn't matter because now it's the rank and you got to treat them with respect. And that was easy for me. But they see I'm like there for a reason, so I'm not really messing around and that buys me some good favor in basic training that made a difference at one point. I was terrible at shooting. Took a long time for me to learn how to shoot. And I had failed my shooting terribly. And if you fail shooting, you get recycled. You get sent back to the beginning of basic training and your whole date for everything gets jacked up, pushed out. I ended up officially failing, but I got one more try and I made it. like barely made it. You got to hit 23 out of 40. I hit 23 out of 40. And I was, I was like, okay, we're in. And then I got to AIT, and AIT is really where like, it was a really great experience. So AIT, for people who don't know, so you go to basic training, BCT, basic combat training, and then you go to AIT, advanced individual training, for your MOS, your military occupational specialty. And my AIT was 22 weeks, but it got shortened to 18 weeks because it would have ran through the holiday. And something I didn't know, even in TRADOC, which is what basic training and AIT are, the training portion, you still get a holiday break. Like, they'll send you home and back. They'll do it as efficiently as possible, but you still get a holiday break. They looked at when our class ended and decided we're not going to do that. We're just going to accelerate it and cut it short. So I did my AIT though, and it was a really great experience because I really got to like be a person and make friends for the first time in my adult life without alcohol. Now, basic training, I tell people the difference between basic training and AIT. Basic training is like prison without the violence, and AIT is like college without the booze. So the big thing to take from that is that in basic training, you don't have any freedoms. There ain't no socializing in basic training. In AIT, it's pretty much like you wake up, you go to class, you can talk, you can have your phone, all that stuff. You can't talk in basic training out there. And then the evening is like yours to hang out, socialize, use your computer, whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. I've made a lot of friends, people I still talk to this day. And I made these friends, fondly. Like, it was weird, there's that theme of me in college and in LA where I'm kind of like weird at making friends, but there's also the background of booze both times. In AIT, there's no booze. And people kind of like look at me as, they're like, okay, here's this older guy here, but he's kicking our ass and the physical stuff. Because at this point, I'm in pro shape. I had no problem with the run test. I think 13 minutes for the 2 mile, which is blazing. I don't think I can do that now. I might be able to, but definitely that's fast. And I'm doing well in the class. So these people like respect me, and I'm like building this friend group out of like respect and making these connections without the booze. And that really helped me finally get sober. It was one of the main reasons I was able to get sober and stay that way, because I had a new identity for the first time without like alcohol, like with new people, new place. Because that didn't happen in fighting. It was shit in fighting. If anything, I probably drank more when I first started fighting than before, because that's part of like the weird warrior culture. Drinking booze. Guys fighting me. But here at AIT, where there was no booze, it was a pretty good time.
Yeah, and you basically were in an advanced electronics program, as I recall.
Yeah. My MOS was a land combat electrical systems missile repair. What a mouthful! 94 Alpha. And as part of that, you have to go through basic mechanical and electronic maintenance or something like that. BMAT is what we called it. It is a 6-week advanced electronics course, hands-on, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then you start working on the weapons as well. Which is what we did. We worked on the weapon system for the military, Javelin, ITAS, and something else. The Bradley tanks, that's what it is, but we don't really use tanks anymore. We still got to know how to use them and fix them and all that good stuff. So that was what I was doing there. And then, and when I got out, I was like, I've earned a drink. Let me go drink. I drank too much. Drank so much that I don't remember, how I got where I got for the night. I just knew I drove. And when I woke up the next day, I was like, this is rough, man. Like, where I'm taking a major risk now in my life. And I thought about, like, I'm in the Army now. My pro career is just starting. I'm enrolled in school finally, and I think I'm going to really be able to do it this time. And I had just met Anna. And honestly, I was like, you know what? This is a really nice girl. Like, that was my thought process meeting her. I was like, what a nice girl. I don't want to expose her to the nonsense. Like, if we break up, I don't want it to be because I did something under the influence. I want it to be because we aren't compatible. Like let's rule out the alcohol because I like her a lot. Let's see where this goes. No, she's still here. It's actually out with my son now. So that had a great outcome. But yeah, 2013, December 23rd. That's when I get my first full day of sobriety.
You do go to one AA meeting, but it wasn't for you.
Wasn't for me, man. Every time I tell this story, I hear I thought I was unique in this. What we learn in recovery is that none of us are really unique. We all got the same problem, and we all have approached it the same way. I went to that AA meeting, and I'm listening to one woman told me about, or no, not told me, told the group, because AA you speak, and you share and shit like that. One woman was talking about how she lost custody of her kids because of her drinking. And this is drinking, not Narcotics Anonymous, to be clear. I was like, wow. And another guy was like, this, I'm here as part of a condition for my release from prison. I was like, yo, this is a big deal. Like, these people got problems. I have a drinking problem. That's not me. I'm not these people. But I don't think I wrote this in the book. Maybe I did. 4 years later, a guy reached out to me on Twitter and was like, hey man, I've been following your stuff on sobriety. You really helped me. I'm going to be in town. I'd like to meet you and let's go to a meeting so you can get your chip. For those who don't know, the chip, you get your chips for your sobriety milestones, first day, first month, year, and so on. And so I go to the meeting with him to get my chip and to share. And I'm listening to other people share. And my reaction this time was, holy shit, I'm just like everyone else here. Like everyone. It's like down to the problems and the issues. And it wasn't because they were different. I mean, they were different shares than the first time I went, but my perspective on why I drink, or why I drank at that point, had changed. I understood and knew more about myself. I understood why I was drinking. I understood what I thought I was getting from it. The only difference between me and those people the first time, it wasn't the drinking or anything like that. It was that I'd gotten lucky. I'd been lucky. That's all it is luck. Because while I was drinking, I've been pulled over 4 different times that I can count, that I'm aware of in my memory. 4 times where if the cops decided it's time to go to jail, I couldn't have said shit. In fact, one time I got pulled over. They had me do a field sobriety test. I do the test. I think I do great. I go, they're like, all right, go sit in the car. Then after a few minutes, they come over and they go, look, you're probably a little over the limit tonight. So you need to hurry up and get home. And I said, Now, I didn't take that as a sign that maybe I should stop drinking. And fortunately, I didn't need to keep getting hit over that same, get a hit over the head with that same sign repeatedly. But it takes a little while sometimes. I always say, look, the cops, well, I got to get lucky every time I drink and drive. The cops only got to get lucky once, And I worked the math out on this on an article I wrote. It ends up being about 1 in every 2,700 times someone drinks and drives, like an aggregate in the population, do they get pulled over. That's kind of frightening. That's frightening for a lot of reasons. One, because we like to think that if you get behind the wheel and drink, you definitely going to, get pulled over, and that's going to be the end of it. And you think about people you've met with a DUI, and you don't think about what you're not seeing, which are all the people who have driven and not got caught. I worked with a guy once at Starbucks. This motherfucker had 4 DUIs. I'm like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, how was that?
Yeah, I have a friend who had 5 DUIs by the time he was 21. He got revoked for 5 years, and he went back and bought a racing motorcycle and said, "The cops ain't never catching me again," and they didn't.
But but to get it that many times, given what we know about like the math,
You got to be all over the road, and you're not just a little buzz. You're like a drunk driver getting busted 4 or 5
like
times.
obviously problematic,
Yeah, exactly.
So like that's a really big deal there. And then on top of that, right? Every time you get behind the wheel with a little bit of booze in your system, if you do get in any type of situation where something goes crazy, that's gonna be I don't know if this is the exact word, an enhancement to your charge. I believe this is a great movie, Shot Caller, about the guy. Well, the premise of the guy. First of all, the actor is the same guy who plays Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones, but he plays like this white collar. I think he's in insurance or stock market or something like that. One of those finance type careers. He goes out with his wife and friends one night for some wine, gets a little buzzed, and then gets into a vehicular collision and kills someone because he was drunk. They give him 2 years, and I think he goes to either San Quentin or Chino, one of those rough prisons in L.A. or in Cali. And then while he's in there, he has to like gang up to survive. And while he's ganged up, he ends up getting an additional 7 years in the end. And because he has to whenever you break the law in jail, that's still breaking the law. You still, go to the hole and get your day in court. But I always think about that movie because the whole reason he ends up doing life in prison eventually is it all started with 2 years in prison from a glass of wine. And that's the worst case scenario too, you kill somebody. But I'm happy to be sober, man. Very happy to have gotten it under control because once that happened, once I put the bottle down and really, really threw myself into what I was trying to accomplish, which was just not be a dickwad, man, not be a loser in life. Things really, really took off in all phases of my life.
You sound like you were a madman, the amount of things you had going. You were starting a pro boxing career. You were taking hard courses in college, preparing for a physics degree. You were working, developing, tutoring. And, it's just like you were a totally on kind of guy. Tell us a little bit about that period of your life.
So when I got back, that 2013, then 2014 kicks off with a blast, man, because I'm back in the gym now training. I got to get a job because, the guard doesn't actually pay anything except drill, and that's like 150. So I got a job at a bank. I still, and then I do have the military drills, and I'm trying to be like I'm managing this new relationship. So I'm like just busy, 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 busy. Gym, training, or gym, work, school, and school, right? And I'm not taking BS classes. I mean, at this point they are kind of BS because it's the community college prereqs. But like it's still like 17 credits a semester. It's still work. It might not be the most taxing work yet, but it's still taxing. So I go in, and for the first like year and some months, man, I don't even go out and socialize. I'm always on doing something. And what that did though is that made I talk about sobriety like it's a habit. Because that's what it is. Sobriety is a habit, just like drinking. You got to give your sobriety time to get strong. I spent that year letting my sobriety get strong and like continuing to build my identity of a respectful person or a respectable person. Someone who people would like want to, I don't know, like look up to. It felt better than being liked, like being respected from all this stuff I was doing. By the time I was introduced to alcohol again, like in a social setting, I was like not even interested at all. I had to trick myself to stop drinking, first of all. I said, look, I'm gonna get a sobriety thing until until I graduate from college, or I write a book, or I win like a major fight. And after a year, I was like, I'm never drinking again. Why would I go back to this? Like, I just felt so much better about me. Like I don't know how much different my health was. And I was exhausted too all the time, like living on coffee, coming home, making pots of coffee at like 9 p.m. But I felt good, man. Because of that busyness. And I was making moves too in fighting and school. I was just making progress the way I thought I should make progress in my life.
Cool. And so at this point, you have turned pro against the advice of your coach.
He wants guys to stay amateur as long as possible because the amateur game is like, okay, that's where you learn to fight. All right. And when you go pro, well, I mean, you still can learn to fight, but the difference now is that your record is like your bargaining chip. And if you lose when you're a pro, it's always with you. And now, if you ever had any chance of getting better, yeah, you'll have it, but you'll have to lose a bunch of fights to get better. And then what do you have? You just got to beat a body with this bad record that you can't cash in for a big payday. Like to put this into perspective, after I lost my first pro fight, I started getting calls for fights for like $20,000, $30,000 because I had a good record, but they thought I was beatable. Right. Meanwhile, though, if my record had been like, 15-7, I'm not getting calls for those fights. I'll get calls for fights, but it won't be for like, 5 figures. So he wanted me to continue to learn how to fight. And on top of that, the better you do as an amateur, the easier your pro career will be, or at least the more profitable your pro career will be. But it starts at a point and it quickly escalates. So there are guys who won like national championships who don't get a promoter, that they're just not good enough. And then if you get to the Olympics, you'll always get a promoter, like period. And it'll be like the best deal you can get. But there's not really a middle ground. Like you either like obviously not everyone can be signed to a promotion company, but it's not like the draft where there are only 252 spots or whatever it is today. It's okay, here's a guy that's good enough, let's offer him a deal. And even still, they still gotta find you and you still gotta get those fights to be showcased. An amateur career, especially if you make any type of noise or beat any notable people, that makes your life a lot easier. Like a lot easier. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck fighting in club shows until you build your record up. This is what happens a lot of times. I've seen this happen to many guys I know. They build their record up fighting local bums in like West Virginia. Nobody that offers any real resistance. And then because they got like a 13, 14-0 record, they get a call. Because everybody's record is on Boxrec. You can go see it when you're looking for opponents. They get a call. They're like, hey, we're going to have you come fight this guy for 20 grand in Madison Square Garden on the undercard of like the Canelo Alvarez fight. And if you win, we'll sign you. If you lose, well, we're not going to sign you. You still getting your 15 grand. Here's the thing though. You're not fighting a nobody. You're fighting their son guy. And they're using you because your record is good and you don't look like what you have is a psychological edge. You haven't lost yet. But the matchmakers are like surprisingly good most of the time. And they can look and see, like, is this guy going to be someone we got to worry about? Is he dangerous? Is his 13-0 a dangerous 13-0 or is it, bullshit, full padded 13-0? They can see all that. So you get a lot of guys who end up going down that route who end up just, they pad their record. They don't think they're padding their record. I truly believe that most fighters don't think that. There's just a very real limit to what you can accomplish without the money of a promoter, without the connections of a promoter. So they end up, being fed to the guys with promoters, unless they pull off an upset, which is what it will be. And they're like, and it's written into the contract. They don't let free agents really float around out there too long if they're good. Like if you beat this guy, you automatically sign with us to a certain amount. So now, granted, there's a lot of laws that have just changed in boxing, but that's a different discussion. So this may feel dated what I'm talking about in 6 to 12 months, but there was a law that just changed in the this week. So we'll see what happens that could affect this. But yeah, my coach wanted me to stay amateur because of all this. But I said, you know what? I know what you're saying, but I'm gonna weigh that out against everything. Plus, at this point, I didn't realize how much of a difference it made, but I felt that me having my experience in LA, Charles Martin hadn't done anything yet, but I had beat him twice, and Dominic had become an Olympian and I had beat him. I thought I had a pretty good chance going pro. Worst case, I was just going to see where this was going to go. And I fought for I won't say no money, but like $100, $200.
Yeah, I was amazed at that. I mean, you're like one of your paydays, $700, and you had to do most of the promotion. I go, damn, you can make more money as an assistant manager at Wendy's. Right?
Oh man, you look. I tell guys all the time, if you want to fight for money, go get a job. You're fighting. The reason you're fighting doesn't exist. What you see is like the very top of the pyramid where you see these guys with money. And you ain't gonna make it there because you're fighting for money. You're not gonna be willing to put in the hard hours and develop yourself as an amateur where there is no money. And you're not gonna put in the time and make the sacrifices to do this for 3 or 4 years to develop your abilities because there is no money. I tell guys all the time, go do something else. If this is about money for you, nah, you get a job. You'll make more money. You'll make it faster too.
And you won't get your head busted.
Yeah. Like there's got to be something wrong. There's got to be something wrong with you in a very special way to fight and to fight well, because you need to simultaneously be like disciplined, but reckless.
So that's you. Was that you at the time?
That's me now. Coming from my comeback fight, I can't tell you. My coach is my friend. I can't tell you how long he tried to talk me out of it. He tried to talk. Here's what he did. It's a perfect example. After he showed me enough videos to just warn me about how dangerous it is, I'm like, dog, I did this for like it's not like I'm fresh chicken. Like, you coach me. I know how dangerous the sport is. Then he shows me a video of me sparring this guy, Teef Overton. Teef is like, I think he's ranked 8th in like the WBC and maybe something else. Point is, he's a good fighter. He's been fighting for a long time. I'm coming off a long layoff at that. And he shows me sparring. He shows me a slow down video of something my foot does. He goes, you see that? I think you still got brain damage from a hit you took 8 years ago. You got to be careful. I'm like, and that's what I say to him. I say, okay, Tom, how about, maybe, or how about this? Hear me out. Atif has been fighting continuously for a decade. I have been off almost a decade. Let's see how I do in a month. And it took 2 weeks, and he was like, okay. But this was after he was trying to talk me out of it too. But there's got to be something wrong with you, in a certain way. You got to be fearless. I'm trying to think. There's a great it's like, if you get to be a surgeon, you got to be comfortable, like not just comfortable, but you kind of got to, like, I don't want to say enjoy. So you just got to shut off that part of you that gets that natural revulsion to like blood and guts that we all have. And I think we all have that same aversion to violence as well, or at least getting hit in physical pain. But for whatever reason, there's something off up here. And it's off in the right combination, because you also got to be disciplined. You can't just be like stupid.
Yep, indeed. Luck cuts so many different ways. You progress through your professional career. You have, about 13 fights, something like that. You're looking pretty good. And then the big time, you get invited to be on national TV. And I actually watched that fight, pulled it up on YouTube. The only one I could find.
Yeah, that's the only one that's out there. You know how long it took me to make sure that's not the first thing that comes up when you look up Ed Latimore? And now, if you look up Ed Latimore boxing, it should be the first thing that comes up.
I think I put in Ed Latimore fight, and that was the first thing that came up. Anyway, well, you tell the story, and I'll give you my perspective after watching it.
I thought I was doing great, and then he hit me, because it took me like 7 months to watch this fight, by the way. I couldn't watch it. And then he hit me with a right around my glove, if I remember right. And it was a great shot. Like, it was just a good shot. And it disrupted my balance. And I thought I had slipped when he hit me. And that's what I told myself. And then I got up again, and no, I didn't slip. I was jacked up. And then he hit me again up against the ropes. And I think I took a knee. Or maybe I fell, but I think I took a knee. I haven't watched it in a long time. It took me a while to watch it, and I haven't watched it since. But yeah, it was first round, smoked by getting just a good punch. That's how crazy heavyweight boxing is. One shot, landed, and I'm not grounded the right way. I'm not defending the right way. Jacks me all up. In one round.
Yeah, that was my take watching it, that, you guys seemed well matched, but you seemed a little bit more skilled and precise in how you were working the ring. And so I watched fighting since I was young. My father was a big fight fan. I even saw Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard fight one time. That was pretty cool.
That was the only time they fought. That's when they say they robbed Hagler. It's close. I could see them giving it to Ray officially, but
Sugar Ray was from near my hometown, fought with the boys club boxing. That's how he got started. So he was our hometown favorite. My minimal knowledge, you seem like you had better ring generalship, but once you took that hit, you were a different man. You were done. You were done. It was just like one shot landed, and then you just looked stunned. You made the count, you took your 2 steps forward, you raised the gloves, he let you go. But I could see this ain't the same dude, man. The starch was taken out of him with that shot. So as you say, luck turned that way that day.
And I never call that luck, because for me to call that luck takes away from what Trey did and his training and all that. But what I will say is it's like, Deontay Wilder. Trey's no Deontay Wilder, but Deontay Wilder fought a lot of guys who were more skilled than him, but that power in that right hand, that completely erases any deficit in skill if it connects.
And that's what happened. I could see it. So you fought one more fight, and ended up as a draw, as I recall. Is that right?
Ended up as a draw, yeah. A draw against the guy that I had beaten before. It was a draw, man, and my heart wasn't in it, because at this point in my life, because they fired me immediately. By fired, they cut me from Rock Nation immediately, which means I lost my money, so I had to get a job. The only job I could find was delivering packages, but I quit that job after the van malfunctioned and almost killed me. And I'm still going to fight because that's what I think makes the most sense. And we had a deal, because they screwed us a little bit on the money for that fight with Trey. They ended up guaranteeing us a second fight down there, regardless of the outcome. So I had a second fight guaranteed, and it was going to be for the same amount of money. But I didn't want to be in the gym. I wanted to get back. I had taken that semester off, how much it, paid off. But I said, I'm going to just get back. I'm going to take a year off from the sport. And that's what I did. I took a year off, went to school, ended up getting connected as a tutor. Turned out to be the most, really, you can miss finding what you're great at by focusing on what you're good at. And that's what I think about tutoring. In another life, I would do that full time. It pays extremely well. It's really satisfying. The only thing that sucks is the hours are dead smack in the afternoon when kids get off from school. But like, I could easily see myself being a private teacher, but they just get paid even less than public teachers. So There's that.
You laid off boxing. You figured for a year, but turned out to be permanent, or 8 years. You came back, and then you got your physics degree from Duquesne University. That's impressive. And some of the courses you took go, whoa, right? So you had go from a kid who couldn't do algebra, you came a long damn way.
Yeah, and I blame, that's the wrong verb. I credit boxing with giving me the confidence to do that, because I went from seeing how much I improved in boxing. I went from being like a slugger that couldn't even beat a regional kid, a kid in my city, not even a regional kid, to getting to a national champion level. And I said, well, if I did that with my body, why can't I do that with my mind? And I went back and I broke down where all my deficiencies were in math and worked on them systematically. This was before there were all these tutorials on YouTube too. I mean, no, granted, this was still easier than had I attempted this, like, 10 years prior, but I found every book I could on every level of math. I was doing problems. I'm so comfortable with fractions now, for example, because all that work I did just rebuilding my mathematical base. And as you know, you can't do physics without math. I laugh when when kids would tell me they had a calculus class. I'm not a calculus class. They had a physics class without calculus. I'm like, how does that work? like you understand that, like, that makes it more difficult. Like, calculus gives you tools to where you can, like, do these problems more precisely and with less effort. But what do I know? I'm just a kid who failed high school. Right?
Yeah, and so you got your degree. You've written a couple of books. You've got some following online. What's next in life for Ed? You're married. You have a child.
Yeah. The big thing that's coming next is this book launch. This book I'm working on. But in terms of, like, outside of that, one, I'm definitely fighting again, and we'll see how that goes. Two, I'm working on booking out speaking, because I also found that I really enjoyed that. And the act of public speaking, it's, what I think it is, it's like that part of me that fights. It's like, here's this stressful situation that makes people feel stressed. They try to avoid it, and I'm like, I have no problem. My wife thinks I'm a psycho because I like singing karaoke. It's the same idea. And I sing karaoke sober, remember?
Yeah. My God. I got one karaoke song. I can do a pretty rockin' version of House of the Rising Sun.
I love House of the Rising Sun.
I can do that.
House of the Rising Sun. I sing a lot of the Doors song. Recently, what I came out to for this fight? I came out to Big Love by the Fleetwood Mac.
Huh.
So that's like the taste of my music. That
classic rocker. All right.
And also I'm working on fiction. So the next book project will be fiction.
I will say this: you are a gifted writer. We talked about this in the pre-game. I'm a good talker, but I ain't much of a writer. I can write, but I'm slow and it's not very elegant. But listeners out there, if you like what you've heard today with Ed, this is a very well-written book. I mean, it sucked me right in. I read it in about 3 days. And
I wish people could see me react. That is, man, look, and look, there's something that someone else said this, and I got to make sure I super clarify, because in the world of nonfiction, they don't really care if you can write. Like, it's a nice bonus, but they don't care, because they'll just hire someone else. I wrote my book.
I could tell after watching a couple of videos of you that you speak very similarly to the way you write, which is you have a certain cadence, and it's very clear, and it's engaging, and it's personal all at the same time. So I was 99% sure you wrote the book yourself.
Thank you. And I'll fight anybody on it who's like, look.
Oh man, he will kick your ass too. He's a professional heavyweight boxer.
No ghostwriters, because ghostwriters are really expensive for what they do.
And most of them actually subtract value if you have any talent. Right?
Yeah, that is very much.
They make it bland. They don't make it. This book is not bland. This book does not fuck around, right? And this tells some harsh shit, right? But yet does it in a very human way. So go get this book because it'll be out right as we're releasing this episode. Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business by Ed Latimore. I think you will enjoy this book. I know I did.
That means a lot, Jim, man. It really does. Like, like you made my day.
Well, you've made my day with a wonderful podcast. This has been a hell of a lot of fun.
Hey, thank you.
Audio production and editing by Andrew Blevins Productions. Music by Tom Muller at modernspacemusic.com.